Welcome back to the Honest Business Podcast. Thank you for joining me. This episode is a Q&A episode around sales. So I received quite a few questions about sales. For those of you who don't know, I support organizations to increase their sales, to grow their revenue, and that in turn often means looking at their sales process, making their sales process quicker if it needs to be, more efficient, helping people within organizations really enjoy sales. And I work with small business owners, so that is, really fun. And often sales is such a huge part of all their day-to-day run-ins and operations. But I'm a real believer in that sales can be fun and sales can work in your business, and they don't, your lead times don't have to be forever and ever. And I'm a real advocate for trying to make people enjoy sales and create a skill set, because ultimately sales is a skill set. It is a habit. It is a skill that you will have for life when you learn how to sell and sell well. It's a constant evolution. It's something you constantly have to, it's like a muscle, you constantly have to use it and you constantly develop it. It's not that you ever kind of reach an end point, but it is really fantastic if you dedicate yourself to learning sales and learning it in a really, positive, non-sleazy way, then it can really do so much for you and your business and help your confidence massively. So yeah, and I always say about the fact that as a business owner, because you're listening to this right now, sales is always your responsibility and job. Even if you manage to outsource it, or you have a sales team, or you have someone who helps you, ultimately the sales is on you. And it forever will be, unless you're building a massive, huge business. I'd still argue it still is, but for most people listening to this, if you're a small business owner, the sales is on you. And it kind of always comes down to that, or you are responsible for motivating the person who is kind of helping you with sales. So today we've got 5 questions that we will dig into. And the first one is a great one, is how can I improve sales? So how can you improve sales? That is a question that has many different avenues. What I'm going to say on this is, you need to look at your sales strategy. If you want to you said, how can I improve sales? But I think what that means is increase sales. I'm going to take it as increase sales because I think that's what you mean. So increase in sales, you need to look at your sales strategy. You need to do an audit. You need to understand what's working. You need to understand what doesn't. Where does your current business come from? Where have, your best clients come from? Understand the picture of what sales looks like in your business. Really important. Then you can, from there, create a sales strategy. I can help you do that. If you need support with that, I can help you with the auditing process. I can do a whole thing. Basically, you can come and work with me. I can create a whole sales strategy for you, and we can have a real discussion and we can look at what that means for you and your business. However, you can do it yourself. You then want to create a sales strategy. You then need to implement and execute, which is often the hardest part. And in that section, you're gonna have to really be kind of agile and ready to move and to collect a lot of data and to fail at times and see kind of where you're making inroads and where you're not. From that, you will then create some data, and that will really help you to understand kind of where you're at. And that can be a process, that whole process can take a week intensely, or it can take, 6 months. It kind of depends on you, the business, your resource, how fast you're going, how aggressive you want to be with it. But improving sales can literally happen overnight / in a week. Based on a certain thing of factors. I'm not saying your sales will dramatically change overnight, but for some people, I can make tweaks in a business where they can really shift straight away. Or it can be a big, long process of, building certain systems and building certain processes and strategies that allow for X, Y, and Z thing to happen if someone has a specific kind of desire for how you want sales to kind of be and the function that takes in your business. But ultimately, if you have a sales problem, or you want to increase your sales, you need to look at your marketing and you need to understand where the connection is between marketing and sales, because often people think that that's the same thing, or they just get really confused with what that is. And so you need to really understand that. Do you have a marketing issue? Do you have a sales problem? You might have both, or you might have one or the other. If you have lots of people, it could be that you have lots of people in an audience, or lots of people on an email list, or lots of people somewhere, and you don't convert very well, that indicates a sales problem. However, that's not 100% always the answer. This is why the podcast is hard. Because there's so many, everything I do in my work is so nuanced based on the specific business, and everything I do is very bespoke. But if you want an overarching thing, if you have got a lot of people somewhere on an email list, in a challenge, in something, you have a lot of traffic to your website, and then there's no conversion, that's typically where it's a sales problem. If it is that actually you can convert people as soon as you get a really strong lead, but you haven't got enough leads, that arguably is a marketing problem. However, it isn't always, because sometimes your marketing can be good, but your sales content and your sales actual strategy in terms of what you're actually doing on a day-to-day basis might not just be activating the kind of transition between the two. So ultimately, most people have a bit of both, is what I find. Most businesses I go into, they've got a little bit of a marketing problem, got a bit of a sales problem. Sometimes people have got a little bit of a marketing problem and a massive sales problem, but it just kind of depends. Most people have got something in terms of marketing going, even if it's one section of their marketing that's working, which is enough to kind of bring in a steady stream of leads. Obviously, there's exceptions to the rule to this, and that can, there's people who have got just massive issues. They come to me and they're like, "Mate, this is a real shit show. Help us. We need help." And that's like, it's okay. It's fine. We'll sort it. The good thing with sales is it can really change really quickly, and you can see a lot of kind of quick wins, and you can see a lot of instant shifts. That's not for every business, and it's not for every kind of function of business. So in terms of like in your sales, if you've got a complex sales process, sometimes it will take longer. But and if you've got a marketing problem, that is arguably quite difficult to fix sometimes, just in terms of, it's not difficult to fix, but in terms of seeing a result quickly, because often you need to give it time to kick in and for your marketing to kick in and for then your sales to make sense. That's a whole process. If you are in a position where you have got really a lot of people, or you've got a good audience, or you've got an engaged audience, or you've got your marketing's good and you've got some kind of warm people, if the issue is converting them or helping them understand why they need to buy your offer, or if you've got people who are like, "Oh, I can't afford it," that is a sales issue, and that's something I can fix for you quite quickly. Some of you in a space of days, some of you in like weeks, months, but it can move fast, which is really exciting, right? But ultimately, you have to make sure you've got enough people coming in at the top of your funnel, and then you've got a process of moving them through your funnel so that they buy from you. And at each point of the funnel, you're going to have different drop-off rates, and you're going to have people who kind of you just lose. Now, the goal is never to convert 100% of the people who come from the top of the funnel. Never in a million years is that going to happen. And you don't really want it to either. But what you can do is improve the percentages of the people that are moving through your funnel, and at what point do they kind of drop off, or they go elsewhere, or they just completely, leave your kind of sales process. That is where you can do some interesting work. If you are sat there thinking, "I need to make cash now and I need to make cash quick," that's a separate conversation, and there's things you can do to make cash. And ultimately, most people will be selling their time or selling their product, but at a discounted rate. You don't have to sell your time at a discount rate, even if you need cash quick. That is a misconception, and you don't need to do it. Please, please, please. I know this is just a side note, but if you need to make cash quick, the worst thing you can do, I'd argue, is discount your time, especially one-to-one time. It's just the worst. It is not good. It's not good for your business strategy overall. It's not good for your brand. It is just not good. There is many things you can do that isn't, just like discounting things and slashing prices on things. Sometimes, obviously, if you are at a point where you're like, "I'm going bankrupt," or I need to make cash, if you've got a product-based business, then fine, like shift some in inventory and, you need some cash flow moving, fine. But there are many other things you can do before you get to that point. Number 2, the question is, how can I accurately forecast my sales for 2023? This is such a great question, and I wish it's a question people ask more, because that is like a really important thing. So sales forecasting is an interesting topic, okay? I take sales forecasting with a pinch of salt. I don't think you need to forecast it to the nth degree of like, especially if you are someone who has thousands and thousands of customers every year, or tens of thousands of customers, then I don't think it needs to be like as specific. If you are someone who works with 8 clients a year, 10 clients a year, 20 clients, 30, 40 clients a year, then, you can be a bit more specific. But ultimately, when it comes to sales forecasting, it's around data. Data is your best friend. Data is what you need. This is why whenever people come and work with me, I'm like, right, you need to start collecting data around all these different data points across many different business functions, because in a year's time and in 2 years' time and in 3 years' time, it's really going to help us. So collect data now. If you're listening to this and you don't collect a lot of data, I need you to collect data. And then in the data that you're collecting, that will help you understand what is truly going on in your business, what is truly going on in your sales process, and you will begin to understand what is happening, because your opinion on how your sales process works is not really that useful most of the time. Often it's completely biased, often because you're doing it, often because it just does not give a true representation of what is actually going on, and often because you can't just keep a tab on it all, right? It's really impossible for you to. So let's talk about the accurately part. The accurately part's difficult of that question, right? Because sales forecasting is there for you to understand, your business and see it from like a bird's eye view and kind of understand what the next steps are for the business. So if you have a revenue goal, often eventually you're going to then do some sales planning to work out, okay, this is how we're going to hit that revenue goal. Now, when you're forecasting that, what you need to really be committed to is how much marketing do you need to do to get those sales. The biggest issue people have is they just make random forecasts, but they don't have any specifics around the marketing piece. Because ultimately, it's your marketing that is the biggest kind of cost, you could argue, and is the biggest thing that takes the most amount of time in order to fully see a kind of wider return. So it's like, if you're now planning your like February, March forecasting, but actually it's way off where you're at right now, it's like, how the hell are you going to get there? Do you need a magic wand? Often people's forecasting, they do. I'm like, this is not going to work. Like, it's not going to happen. I love creating forecasts for people, but I come from a very kind of realistic and when I say realistic, that's not about being boring, or it's not about saying like, oh, you can't do it, or this, that, and the other. It's just about kind of explaining that realistically in the business, what resource do you have and can you actually do that? So when you look at forecasting your sales, it's like, well, how many sales did you make in the last 3 months? What is the average order value? What does it look like? What are people buying? Why are they buying it? Why is it? Was it time of year that people buy more? Was it the time that they needed that specific thing? And then you also need to look at your market and be like, right, what will we push in our market and what do people actually buy? Is there any correlation? Are people actually buying something that's completely different to the thing that we were talking about? You need to understand all this data because that will give you a much better picture of your sales. Now, the one thing I would say is using data alone is not going to give you an answer, because using data alone then just often leads you to then be thinking, well, we didn't sell anything in June, so that means we're never going to sell anything in June forever and ever and ever, which is complete bullshit, right? That's rubbish. So you've got to take the data, but you've also got to be really, objective with it and be really kind of talking through it and analyzing it from well, why was that? And ask yourself why? Constant whys to whatever the answer is, and then ask the next why, because that will get you to the crux of what is actually going on and what is actually happening. But understanding, accurately forecasting data or accuracy forecasting sales using data is such a powerful tool in your business, but it needs to be taken with a pinch of salt. I just see it as, and I often like to kind of give 3 scenarios and do 3 forecasts and be like, okay, these are the options. This is what it might look like. But what you have to understand is, do you have the resource? Do you have the knowledge? Do you have the kind of motivation to do the marketing that's involved to get to that sales goal? Because that's what it comes down to. And most people are not. Most people like to look at the numbers. They like to look at the revenue forecast. They like to see what's happening. Is that going to make sense? The other thing you need to really think about, especially if you're a business that's pushing out over 300,000 a year in revenue plus, or if you're at the 7-figure mark or the 8-figure mark, operationally, can you deal with the sales that you're forecasting? This is the next issue. I have businesses that I work with who we purposely don't market, or we don't do X, Y, and Z thing, or we don't have any sales activity going on because they physically can't manage that right now. And so they have to take a breather and be like, okay, well, there's no point in us doing X, Y, and Z thing, because if we got all those sales, we can't service them. That is something that people struggle with. And if you want to keep your brand values strong, and if you want to keep your reputation high in terms of if you deliver really good service, do not just go and get more sales and try and scale your revenue if your operations is not right, because it will come and bite you on the arse big time. And it can take you years and years to recover, which is something people do not talk about and people aren't open about. I have seen horror stories of what happens when people just go for it in a sales. Because when you get a really good sales process and a great sales system in place, you want to keep going. You're like, this is amazing. I want to keep moving. I want to do this. I totally get it, right? And it's hard. And I'm sat there. This is with people who hire me as an advisor and a consultant and sit on their business as basically like a strategic partner, as a team member in their business, essentially on a monthly retainer. You know, I'm sat there going, well, yeah, this is working, this is great, but you're gonna have to stop a minute for a couple of months or a month or 2 weeks because we need to deal with X, Y, and Z thing. That is really, really important. So whilst, and again, this is like everything I talk about, right? Every single thing is connected in business. Everything needs to relate to a wider strategy and there needs to be a wider plan. This is why I do what I do, and this is why you can come and work with me, because I make a lot of this easier for you in your business and can prevent a lot of kind of, not disasters, but frustration happening from this situation. So that is question number 2. Question number 3 is a great one. This is about how can I shorten my sales process and get people signing quicker? This is a really good question, yeah? So some of you will have sales processes that feel like go on for forever and a day. Some of you are like, for God's sake, why does it have to be so long? Just to clarify for anyone who doesn't know, what I mean by sales process is how long it takes from someone finding you to buying from you. It also can mean how long it takes from someone inquiring about a service to signing on the dotted line and being onboarded. 2 different things, but slightly different processes down the line. When we're talking, wider sales process, and we're talking about data and kind of like the last question about forecasting sales, you would use the definition of sales process being from, when they first initially make any kind of interest in you, which would arguably be like leaving your email address or something that is somewhat of a tiny micro commitment. Whereas when we're talking about sales process and how do we improve it in terms of conversion, I then start speaking about it from the point in which they make an inquiry. Obviously, there's a scope to make improvements at the point between them making their first initial thing and then reaching out again. But that's I'm not going to talk about that today because that's a whole other situation to talk about. What I'm going to talk about today is from the point in which someone reaches out and says, hey, I think I want to work with you, or can I inquire, or they apply for something, and then getting them to sign the contract, because sometimes that can take weeks, days, months. I have known someone who it's taken a year, but that's, and if you work with big corporates or you work with people whose lead times are big because, charities, or they've got to go to board or they've got to go to wherever, then, some of this is you can't manipulate hugely. However, a lot of people listening, you can, because you're dealing with B2B and you're dealing with smaller organizations and people where you're talking directly to the decision maker. So first thing is, make sure you're speaking to the decision maker. Whoever you are talking to in a business, you need to make sure that that person you're speaking to is the person that makes the decisions and calls the shots. Yes, some of you will have to speak to the people using the thing you actually do or the thing you service, but it's really key to not waste loads of time talking to someone who ultimately doesn't have the cash to be able to say yes or no. But in terms of shortening your sales process, and just for context here, I have a real joy of having a really short sales process. I purposely make it really easy to buy from us. I try and make it as simple as possible. Just this week, actually, we had someone who reached out and they had signed a contract, paid their payment, was sorted in the space of, I think, 30 minutes from them reaching out. But from the point in which we sent the contract to them signing and then paying was 3 minutes. Okay, 3 minutes. Now, that's pretty fast, but it's still not, this month we've had 2 others or one other person who was a similar, like, it wasn't 3, but it was like 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6, 10 minutes, like really fast moving people. Now, some of you will be sat there thinking, God, yeah, I've sent a contract and it's taken me like the person 2 weeks before they sign it. I am very much, we have conditioned people, not in a bad way, but we've just kind of built a business and built a sales process where we move. And so when we move, the people who are going to work with us also move. And so, I'm not saying you have to get it to 3 minutes or you have to get it really, short. Some people obviously are signing contracts where they need to go and speak to a lawyer. They need to, read it. You need to do whatever. Like, there's many reasons as to why your sales process isn't going to be in an hour, and that's fine. I don't think you need to, the goal is not to get it to 3 minutes. The goal is to make sure that you feel in control of your sales process and that you're in control of the speed. Because often the frustration comes when you're not in control and the person on the other end, who's the client, is in control. And that feels frustrating. It can feel really annoying and you're like, so annoying. So you need to set really clear boundaries. You set the tone, you set the pace. So people think they don't have the opportunity to do that. And people think like, oh, I can't do that because it's the person who's making the decision does it. It's like, no, it's about how you roll. And there's certain things that I just am like, well, this is the process and this is how it works. In order to shorten it, often is explaining to people how it works and explaining how your business operates and how it works for like in just the expectation. You set the expectation. And I think sticking to that is really key. So this comes back to boundaries and you having really strong boundaries and you saying, right, well, you want to become a client with me. This is how this works. Now, at first, that's going to feel weird and it might feel a bit strange. What I have found is it is so empowering for people. Like so many people come into my business and they'll be like, I absolutely loved how quick that was. I love how simple it is. It's so great. I want to implement that in my business. I want to kind of create that for me because like it doesn't need to be this really long drawn out thing. And I'm like, yeah, great, cool. Like I love that. And I love that, when we, especially as women, create a system that works for us, other women can benefit from it. Like other people can just be like, yeah, this is a cool, fun way. So you getting people to understand that there's urgency is really important. You getting people to understand like, I haven't got all day, so move. That's really important. And I'm very vocal about that, right? Like the way I present myself, the way I show up, the way I talk, the way we market, the language in which I use. I am very clear. I'm very straight to the point. I talk directly to people and people know I'm busy. So I'm like, don't fuck me around. Like, let's move. Yeah. And that's not me saying that people can't take as long as they need or take time to decide a decision. I am the least pushy salesperson you're going to meet. I'm like, cool. If you want it, great. If you don't, that's fine. If you want to come back in 6 months, great. If you want to come back in 2 years, like I am really chilled out. But what I'm not is I'm not disrespectful of my time and other people's. And for me, my time is so precious. So I'm just very like take it or leave it. But I am open about that. And I talk very clearly about that. And people understand. I say, right, if you want to work with me at X date, you need to get in now. And I will be open about my availability. Now, I am not someone who personally likes to or feels good to lie about their availability. I won't say, I've only got 2 spots. I've only got 1 spot if I haven't. Like for me, to be in integrity, I need to do that. That's up to you whether you wish to do that. I just don't think it feels great. And I'm just like, why? There's no need to. But if there is a genuine urgency, say that. Tell people. People need to be told. And I am the person who has bought when there's been 1 spot left or, there's been X thing. Like it does, I'm the sort of person that does like feel the bum and it does give me a bit of a like, right, let's move, let's do this. And so it's really, really important that you decide what your sales process is. You look at it from every single touch point, every single thing in interaction. How can you make it more efficient? How can you automate it? How does it read? Does it make sense to people? Are they going to have questions? Often the biggest issue is sales process gets drawn out because people have questions. So how can you answer the questions so that you don't have to ask you? How can you ensure that everyone has what they need so they don't have to reach out? That's really important. Does your tech work? Does it all make sense? Really important. The other thing is following up. Like if you are having a conversation with someone and you want to take, maybe your process right now is that it takes 6 weeks and you want to get it to 3 weeks. Just make your follow-up time shorter. Be like, okay, when are we next following up on this? Are you happy for me to contact you next week, 3 days later, 5 days later, whatever? Yeah, great. That's fine. Please, can you? Yeah, of course I will. I love people following up with me. If I reach out, I want to be followed up to. If I don't reply to you, follow up with me. Like, I just need to know, right? I'm busy. I've got so much going on. Your message might have slipped through. Your email might have got lost. Follow up. Stop having an issue with following up. I think people get really weird about that. So I'm all for following up and saying that you need to do it. However, I also understand if you are very busy in your business and you are booked out, don't feel like you have to follow up all the time. Because I'm at a point in the business where often I don't. Like, I'm not someone who's going to, like, if someone hasn't replied and they've asked for a link for something and they haven't bought, I'm not going back because I'm just like, right, if they want it, they'll come and buy it. But if I'm, like, going backwards and forwards with someone because, it's a big consultant project and they've got a lot going on and the reason that they haven't got back to me is because I know they're busy, obviously I'm going to follow up with them. So there is a difference there and you need to differentiate that because that will really help you to understand kind of where that is. And that depends for us offer by offer in the business. and then whether I'm going to follow up or not, or whether someone else on the team is going to follow up, because it might just be that it's helpful. The other thing that's key with your sales process is doing what you say you're going to do. So if you're going to send someone something, or you're going to send a proposal, send the damn thing and send it in the time frame you said. If you go over, or don't do whatever you said you're going to do, immediately the trust is kind of damaged, immediately the boundary is gone, immediately it's just not really it, right? So don't make promises you can't keep. Don't say you're going to do something if you can't, and just really chill, like get really focused on that, and then chill out on everything else. Make sure your process is really slick and really, efficient, but then also kind of detached slightly from the outcome. And I find that that's really good in terms of shortening it. The other thing to kind of mention with this is that you might think your sales process is really optimized and really efficient, but there's still improvements you can make. So if you want to come and speak to me about that, you can, because I can help you and look at it, and I can audit it and be like, okay, this is really cool, this is really good. Because it might be that it's already working really well, but now after this kind of listen to this, you're thinking, oh, maybe there is something I can do, and maybe something I can change. Because a lot of people come to me, they don't think there's anything wrong with the sales process. It's not falling apart, it works for them, they're making money. But it's like, how do we optimize that further? And that optimization can give you back so much time, which is ultimately what we're all kind of trying to get, right? The time thing is the biggest issue. The money, we can make more of the money. The time is the limited resource that we'll forever be limited to. Number 4 is this? Yeah, number 4 was a question around, should I do sales calls or not? This is a question that's completely up to you, right? I think sales calls are good. They can be very useful. Sometimes you need to have them. Sometimes people want to have them. Likewise, if you don't like doing them, you don't have to do them. There's many different ways now you can do essentially a sales call. Like you can voice note people without actually seeing them. Do you just want to ring them and not actually be on video? Do you need to get on a Zoom? Can you send proposals? Is there an application process? There is so much you can do now just before get on the phone. And the one thing I would say is, do not just get on the phone with someone. You need to have screened them to some degree. So either get on, have an application or speak to them. Before you give your time away on a call, you need to understand why you're getting on that call. And people also need to understand how much money, whatever the thing is that they're potentially going to buy from you is. Do not get on that call and someone not know how much it is. It's a complete waste of time for both parties, and it's not fair, in my opinion. I really don't like it. I really don't agree with it. If you do, then that's fine. Do what you want. But it's considering you listen to this podcast, you want my opinion. My opinion is people need to understand how much things cost. Because there isn't, right? People can get on the phone with me and someone might think my one-to-one costs 100 grand and someone else is thinking it's £500 for 6 months. It's not helpful for people. So if I just am like, right, my one-to-one's 15 grand for 6 months, it's like everyone knows whether they can afford it or whether they can't, or whether it's, way under what they thought. Great. But give people an understanding of what's happening. If you enjoy doing sales calls, do them. There's this real thing of you should move off from a sales call. You don't have to move off from a sales call. If you want to sell on the DMs, sell on the DMs. If you want to use both, use both. I use both. I love both. I predominantly sell through the DMs. I don't get on a sales call very often. But if sometimes I want to speak to someone and sometimes they want to speak to me. So this is the other interesting thing. Often I'm having a sales call with someone because I want to speak to them so that I can vet them. I work out whether I want to work with them, work out whether I can help them. That is mainly why I get on them. Because I'm not having anybody in my private one-to-one container who I haven't worked out. Can I help them? Do I like them? Do I want to? I get that you might think that's a privileged thing to say, but I choose to be like that in my business. I choose to decide who I want to work with. So it's I'm getting them on a sales call partly for my benefit to find out, are they for me? Because through an application and through DM can be difficult a call just can be easier. What you do need to be careful about is, what are you getting on a sales call for, and the value of the sale that it's going to be. So if it's not for a lot of money, do not get on a sales call. This is why you've got to have a clear sales process. And you have to have a clear sales process for every single thing you offer in your business, which builds out part of your sales strategy. So when I'm talking to you about coming to work with me to work on your sales strategy, we can do that in an intensive. We can do that through a CEO strategy day. We can do that work in one-to-one. This is how this all connects together, because it's part of a much wider kind of process, but everything in your business will have a specific sales process for that specific offer. And so all the different things we offer in the business will dictate whether or not someone can have a sales call. Because I'm at a point where I'm I just won't get on the phone for someone if it's for X thing. Someone else on the team can, Or I will voice note them because I can voice note backwards and forwards, fine. But certain things, people are not getting on the phone. And if that means they don't buy, that's okay. I've made that decision, right? That might not fit for your business. I'm not suggesting you do that. But what I am saying is that you need to fully understand what it is you're doing for each thing you offer. And sales calls are good. I love sales calls. I think sales calls will have a real resurgence in a few years. If you're selling high ticket, sales calls are fantastic. Yes, you can sell high ticket from the DMs. Yes, you can sell it from attraction marketing 100%. But I think a lot of people, if you're selling high ticket, really like and want to talk to each other. Number 5, final question. What do you do when no one is buying and you are selling? So this is when you're actively selling and no one's buying, right? And everybody's had this. I have this. Everyone has this. The people you look up to have this. I think the biggest issue with this is people think that it's like they're the only ones, or that it's really bad, or that there's somewhat wrong, like something wrong with them, right? This is normal. You are going to put offers out there and people not be that bothered. You're going to put offers out there and people be like, oh, I really like that. Now, what that doesn't mean to say is that if people don't bother and they don't like it, that you should get rid of the offer or it's a crap offer. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is you need to change your mindset and change your process and the kind of thought process around what to do when no one's buying. Essentially, if no one's buying, you need to keep selling and you need to sell through the silence and you need to keep going because you need more data. And again, it comes back to data, right? I want you to collect loads of data. I want to know how much of X thing you did, how much of Y thing you did, why didn't it work? At what point did people potentially reach out, but then they didn't sign? Why did they not sign? There's so many things that, I want to know from that experience. When no one is buying and you're selling, if you are consistently following a really solid strategy, and I mean a solid strategy that is a good sales strategy, and you have really executed it and it's still not working after a really prolonged period of time, then it's like, right, let's change the messaging, let's refocus, let's change what's going on. Often it's the messaging. Pretty much all of the time, it's around positioning and messaging and make sure that you've got it right. And if you don't get it right the first time, that's okay. We can change it. It's very difficult to 100% get it spot on every time. You can change mid-launch. If you are someone who's doing launches in your business and you're like, this is just not working, you can pivot fast and you can change messaging. The other thing I would say is when no one's buying and you are selling, are you actively selling? Everyone will be like, yeah, I'm actively selling. Like, what are you doing? Putting story slides up on your Instagram stories with information about what you're offering is not active selling. It's part of a sales strategy. It is not, that's not what you should be doing. If you're just posting things and then you're like, no one's buying. I'm like, right, because you haven't sold anything. We don't know what it is. People do not read stuff. People are not, and often what happens is people put the same slides up, which I totally get, right? Like, that's convenient and great, but it's also quite lazy. And I'm not saying you can't reuse stuff. I'm just saying, like, have the slides and repeat the slides, but talk to camera and speak about the offer and then have the slides after or have the slides before or have them in between and have a mixture and talk about different things. Because if you're just putting random things out there, it's like, no one's really going to do anything. Why would we? We're not enticing us in any way to do it. And so there's a huge entitlement piece with sales, especially when no one's buying. People get really defensive. They get really like, oh, this is so hard. This is that. I'm like, hang on a minute. Like, chill out. The world doesn't, the universe doesn't owe you anything. Your business doesn't owe you anything. You're not owed sales. So sort your marketing out. Sort your sales activity out. Start actually doing really good sales activity. Learn from it. And I know that sounds really harsh, and I know that sounds really tough, but it's like, it's what you need to hear. If people are not buying, that can be for a whole host of reasons. But one of those reasons, and some of those reasons are out of your control, right? So I'm not saying you're 100% in control of everything. You're not. There will be things that happen that are out of your control. But to some degree, if you've got a solid offer that is worth selling and you're kind of doing all of the things, it might just be that your messaging is not hitting and the way you're saying it is not connecting. Look at your language. Look at the words you're using. Look at how you say it. Also, are you bought in from an energetic perspective? A lot of the time people aren't. So they're like selling something where you can tell the other person really doesn't, like, they're not bothered, or they don't believe in it, or the price is too high and so they're not, like, they don't feel in alignment with it. Or they're selling it and they're like, I just need to make money. If you need to make money quick, you look desperate and you can tell. There's things you can do to not look desperate, and that's okay. I'm not shaming anyone who is in that position because it's hard, right? It's tough. We've been there. We've all been there. But what I'm saying is your mindset work, your energetic work, it all needs to be really high in order for you to really focus and be like, right, This is what I'm doing. This is who I'm helping. This is why they're going to buy this thing. Also, get really specific on what you're selling. So many people start selling something and I'm like, what are you actually selling? It's not clear. And what I mean by that is, what is the end result? And the end result is often not clear enough and is too wishy-washy. We could go on forever talking about sales. I love talking about sales. In case you haven't guessed, I have a wealth of knowledge and information around sales. If you've got any more sales questions, send them my way. You can find me on Instagram at may.james_, and I will add them to the list and do them in our next Q&A episode. I hope you are very well. Thank you for listening. Have a beautiful, gorgeous day, and I will speak to you next week. Bye.